Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Andy is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Let me give you the call-in line. We'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And there's a link to all of your instructors on the website, USAPREPARES.com, USAPrepares.com. Podcasts are free. And for those of you new to the class, there are over 200 of us here at USA Prepares. We are innovators, dentists, medical doctors, engineers, surgeons, CEOs, broadcasters, editors, researchers, authors, physicists, programmers, farmers, and inventors. We're students rising to become instructors as well. And none of us is capable of holding down a job. I'm delighted to introduce to you your newest instructor, Ronnie McMullen. Welcome, Ronnie.
How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, we can't hold down jobs, I know. And, the reason I say that is, Ronnie, that, we are passionate about what we do. And, one of the things I think about when I think of some of the supervisors I've had in my life, I come up with the same few words, and that is, how did that guy get so far, on so little, make so much, and stay so long? And what I mean is, we have better ways of doing things, more innovative ways of doing things. We have, we want to do a much, much better job. And, if we were hampered and hemmed in by a system that, would encourage us to just have average job performance, we wouldn't be able to stand it. That's why we can't hold down a job. And a lot of us have left the fold of corporate environments and started our own corporations or businesses. And you've done the same thing, right?
I have.
Yeah.
It's entrepreneur since I was probably 13.
Did you say 15?
13, yeah.
Oh,
13 years
really?
Old. Yeah.
That's about when I started. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I started cutting lawns in the neighborhood and then reinvesting my earnings into better and better equipment. Ultimately, I bought a Jeep as my first car with a snowplow and reinvested those earnings into, more and more machinery. Tell me about when you started at 13. 13
years old, I started with a paper route. And, and I didn't know. I thought paper route, you can just get paid so much money. But actually, what you did is they handed you a route, and then you were supposed to grow it and make it do better and whatever. So I started out with 62 customers, and within 6 months, I had 132 customers. So that was the spell for me to say, I think you're an entrepreneur. In those days, it wasn't called that; it was just called success.
Right.
But the entrepreneur word wasn't used a whole lot. By the time I was 17, I had started my own egg business, where I was distributing eggs to restaurants and to people, and kind of a small farmers market kind of idea. And so always was doing something, never quite fit in the go to work for somebody else mold.
Yeah. Same as me. Now, I did have some jobs. I did some computer design for 3 of the largest banks in the country, building really what I thought was really neat computer systems. But in terms of knowing what I wanted to do early, I really liked being an entrepreneur. I really did, because I was in control of my own destiny. and I could do things better than I thought others might want to do them. So, Ronnie McMullen, you are a former talk show host. You've had 2 syndications under your belt. You're an author of 2 books. The latest, Journey into Reflection. You're the CEO of a company called GetTheT.com. Let me say that again, GetTheT.com. It's an online, non-GMO organic supplement company. And, Ronnie, can you just share with us your thoughts about Journey into Reflection, one of your books?
That's actually, you do things in life, and I don't know, sometimes the way that we're built as human beings, we rate. We rate what we do. That was really important. That was really stupid. That was this. My book, Journey into Reflection, is one of the things I'm really proud of. Not that it's, New York Times bestseller. Don't want to say that. But it just really changes how you think. It's a very spiritual book. And it's kind of like short stories. So these stories kind of take you, it's like a little movie set, and you just kind of read through the different stories that kind of make you think about spiritual things or make you think about yourself. And, the more we know ourselves, the more we're going to know God. And so it's really important to know why we do what we do and how we do it and how we see things. And really, beliefs are can be a huge divider, and they can be a huge additive. But beliefs are about perceptions, how we see things. And so I wrote a book. Instead of saying, okay, you need to do this and you need to do this, I made this little movie set, and this little story goes on, and you kind of put yourself where you feel that you need to play that part. And if you're the grocery store owner, or if you're the guy that's going through the muck or whatever, you kind of put yourself into that play, or that family member. And I've had the people that have read my book just absolutely love it, and that's fun. There's no money in books ever, but it sure was fun, and seeing what happened to people when they read the book.
I've met a lot of people in my life who are part of a fraternity, and that fraternity is called Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda, and they literally. They literally say things like, I could have done that, I would have done that, I should have done that, but they didn't. Now, is your book one that would help someone with that coulda, shoulda, woulda syndrome, or membership in that unofficial fraternity, that, they could place themselves in scenarios? I think what I'm going to do the next time I get one of those great ideas, instead of coulda, shoulda, woulda, I'm actually gonna. Is that something that... Go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you can put yourself in, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but it's more, how many times do we get in arguments with somebody and we hold fast to our position? And, it's kind of like I always give the analogy of there's always 2 sides to a coin. Well, when that coin is laying down, okay, you only see one side. So how do you know the other side? And to me, we need to investigate those perceptions, and we need to know what's on the other side of that coin, because for us to be a balanced person, we need to know what's on both sides of the coin. Now, what's interesting is the coin spins, even if you don't know what's on the other side of that coin, it still spins. You can still go get, if you have a quarter, it's worth 25 cents. But it's important to know what you have on both sides of the coin. So that's really what the book does, is it takes you to a place and shows you different perspectives and how people see different things. And it kind of gives you an edge in life how to deal with things, because you see more than one side of the coin.
Ronnie McMullen, I think that's great information, great advice, and it reminds me of a story, and I know you like to tell stories, and so do I, and we both teach via stories. Well, years ago, we were building a house. My parents were building a house in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and they selected a guy that was well versed in home building, and he had a great reputation, and he was known as the guy, the best builder in that particular small village. And so progress was going on, and it was right next door to my farm, adjacent to my farm, and we shared the same property line, my parents and I. And I would go and inspect the job, and And I was talking to the builder one day, and I just couldn't believe what he did. There was one thing that it just didn't set well with me, and I talked to him on the phone, and the argument became, more and more heated. It wasn't a screaming match, but it was like, I can't believe you did that. It makes no sense to me why you would build it that way. And so he was defending his position, and I still couldn't understand it. And finally I said to him, I got it. I got it. I understand. You and I have different experiences. We haven't been the same places. We haven't even lived in the same state for, very long together. And so because of your experiences being different from my experiences, we would have done it differently. You did it a totally different way than I would have done it. I think my way's better. You think your way's better, but we don't agree. And we agreed that was really the reason, because our experiences were different and we came from different places. And I guess that's what you're saying that you address. Is that right?
Exactly. Because a lot of us as human beings, we see our side of the coin, and there is no other side of the coin. Mm-hmm. And that's not true. So, and for us to be really well-versed, we need to know both sides of the coin. And it gives us an edge because we can help people and we can communicate better and we can be community better.
Mm-hmm. I'm building a new studio. I'm converting our dining room on our farmhouse into a broadcast studio. I have a broadcast studio right now, but it's at the other end of the house, and it's inconvenience upstairs. And so I'm spackling, and I put in some French doors, and, I ran the network wiring and those kinds of things. Uninterruptible power, I've run through the entire farmhouse. And what I've done every step of the way is we have a son who helps us on the farm. He lives here. My wife lives here with me, and so we are a family unit. And our other son spends a lot of time here. So something as simple as painting the walls, the color of the ceiling and the color of the walls, and the carpeting, which Oriental rug we're going to put in there, and the furnishings and all that. Even though I would call it my studio, because none of the rest of the family are into actually broadcasting, but they're going to be going in and out of that room. I've got them all involved in every one of those decisions. And unless we all agree on how it's going to be, we don't do it. Because I don't think it's right for me to impose my will on others. And that's kind of how I look at it. However, there are certain times in business where I am a dictator, because somebody's got to make that ultimate decision. Is that something that you agree with?
Absolutely. There's got to be a chief, and there's got to be somebody in charge.
We'll be right back. So let me tell you how I met Ronnie McMullen. So I was listening to the radio. My favorite broadcast is USA Prepares, of course. And I was listening. I was listening during the commercial break, and I heard this commercial for GetTheTea.com. And I do what I typically do, or I did what I typically do, and that is I pick up the phone and I call the telephone number given out, or I go to the website and I find the telephone number and I make a call, and I introduce myself and I say, hi, I'm Vin Finelli, and I was listening to the radio, and I heard this advertisement for your company, and I'd like to talk with your CEO. And then I talk with the CEO, and I find out whether I like the company, the way they handle the call, the professionalism, whether I like their product, and I talk to the CEO. And if I don't like what I hear, then I complain, and that commercial ceases running on my broadcast. But that's not the case here, of course. And I liked the reception. I liked the young lady who answered the phone, and I got a chance to talk to Ronnie McMullen, and we found so many things in common. I thought, gosh, I'd really like to have Ronnie come on the air and tell his story, and I wanted to invite him to be a part of the faculty of USA Prepares. So here we are. That's how it happened. Is that how you remember it, Ronnie?
That's exactly how I remember it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mentioned to Ronnie that I never put people on the air whom I don't like. First I have to like them, I have to agree with what they have to say, because I don't put people on who are on the other team. And, well, why would I put on someone who wants to steal from us? I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to do that. So getthetea.com. Ronnie, can you tell us about your offerings and why you have this company, what you see it doing, why you do it, and why you're so passionate about it?
Well, the company's 11 years old, and it kind of matches in an interesting time zone because I was on radio for 12 years and had a couple of shows, and you're always looking for sponsors and what have you. And I basically, when I first started, a couple of years went by, and then I unfortunately got sick. And when I got sick, one of my listeners had called and said, got an idea for you. This is something you might want to try because it'll help you, and you need to try this tea. So I did, and I really wasn't a tea drinker. I was like, oh, this is crazy, but it's really an herbal tea. It's not like green tea in the store that you get for $5. And it's really a concoction of 8 different herbs. And so, with that being said, I got this tea, and I started feeling better, a lot better. In fact, over 3 months, I lost 25 pounds. Not that it was a weight loss. That's not really what it's about. But it cleans the colon, so it really told me that I kind of was jacked up. And with this, I got a hold of the doctor that formulated it, said, this would really be good for my listeners. And basically, that's how the tea started. And with that, later on, I had some more issues go on with my body. When you abuse your body with different foods and how you eat and sleep and, no exercise or, what have you, you can really change everything in your body in a bad way. And that's what I did. I was very abusive to my body. And so you end up paying for it when you get older. And then you're like, oh, I need to change my ways. And sometimes it can be too late for certain things, but actually, I'm going to take that back. It's never too late. But, you pay more when you're older. It's just kind of, you pay to play. And so with this going on, I had this tea, and I decided, I wonder if there's some other elements and things. So anyway, from one thing to another, I studied and became a formulator of different herbs and learning what they do and how they deal with body, and to help us, because herbs are put here, plants and trees are put here to help us get through the issues of sickness and disease, which is dis-ease. And so anyway, I started formulating, and here we are 11 years later, and my company is, becoming a little more known. We're still a very small company. I don't want to get the illusion that we're some big corporate, but we're still pretty small. But it's been very fun.
We come back, and I'll tell you a short story about a call that I got from Europe about your product. Very interesting. Ronnie McMullen's with us, getthetea.com. We're going to talk more about specifics of the tea and what it might do for us when we come back. Ronnie McMullen's with us, getthetea.com. Ronnie, I want to tell you in our class a short story. So I have some friends whom I've never met, and that's absolutely true. I have friends whom I've never met, and we talk on the phone. And one of my friends is a gentleman by the name of P.J. Bardon, B-A-R-D-O-N, and he lives in Europe. And he called me and he said, "Vinny, get the tea." Get the tea. And he consumes your products, and he wanted to make sure I did as well. So there you have it. Interesting that someone would call me from Europe specifically to tell me to get your tea. He thinks it's that good. Now, Ronnie, I assume you've never met P.J. Bardon. Is that right?
Correct.
There you go.
Correct.
So isn't that interesting?
It's kind of a fascinating story because you never know who's using your tea or what, who's using your product or who's talking good about it or whatever. And it's always fascinating to me. Mm-hmm.
And he's told me well over a year ago, Vinny, you've got to take Allison. You have got to take Allison. And he was right about that too. So, when he calls me, we spend, maybe 30 minutes on the phone. and he demands my complete attention. PJ Barton, I'll tell you how these phone calls go. He'll send me a document, and that document will be an email, and that is the discussion items that he wants to talk about. So he'll send me a 3-page list of the things that he wants to talk about, and he insists that I have it in front of me, that I printed it out, that I can take notes on it when we're discussing it. I mean, that is how intent he is on making sure that I hear, listen to, and understand every word he says. And your Get the Tea was part of that discussion. So I just wanted to share that. Class, these things really happen. So, Ronnie, can you share with us some stories about who has taken your tea product? Because I'm sure there are those who are listening are saying, come on, you put this supplement in water, it hardly adds to the weight of the original water, and are you telling me that I'm going to have some results? Can you tell me what some of those results might be or have been?
Well, I got to be careful, because when you have something that's really good, there are certain powers that don't like you saying that. If I was a big pharmaceutical giant, then I could say all kinds of stuff, and I'm good to go. But for some reason, when you talk about supplements, everything changes. So I'll do it as best I can, but I have had multiple emails, and I mean, we're talking thousands of emails, and every one of them is different. And I'm talking directly on the tea. I've had, multiple emails on other products as well, but we'll just deal with the tea. So on the tea of what it does for people, and I've had people say their hair, their liver, their obviously their colon, more energy, they could, clear thoughts. I mean, it's just literally all over the road. And I always thought, this is kind of interesting that it does so much stuff, but it's different for every person, and it comes back to the same thing. Your body's different than my body, and my body's different than Joe's body, and we can go on down the line. So every body is different, and the herbs react to every body. And so, because somebody will say, this does this for me, and then the other person will go, yeah, it didn't do that, but it did this for me. And it's always a positive. It just may not be the same exact positive as the last guy or the last girl. But the one thing that I hear constantly is it can relieve constipation, which is it kind of helps move your digestive. And so we have a lot of different herbs in there that help with the digestive tract, so that for me, I'm a plant-based diet. I've been on that for, a little over 2 weeks, and boy, it's almost like now the herbs are supercharged. So somebody that eats meat, or chicken or fish or whatever, really, really would benefit from having the tea, because it helps that digestion. Like if you're eating beef, it's about 72 hours for it to go through your body. If you're eating plant food, it goes through your body in 4 hours. Now, the kicker to this is the fact that when food stays in your body longer, it's not good for you. So that's why people that eat like little meat, that they do pretty good. And, and this misnomer of chicken is way better than fish, or chicken is way better than beef, is that's not really a truth. So, people need to go study and learn. We need to take our health back. And whether it's me, other companies, whatever, you need to look for things like you don't want a product that has GMOs. You don't want to have a product that's not organic. And you definitely don't want products that have fillers. And I couldn't believe this. Supplements actually have rice flour and wheat flour, which wheat, by the way, is gluten for gluten intolerance. And they have these products inside of something that should be, should be selling this other herb. So I think, why are they doing that? And, well, they're doing that because wheat flour, rice flour is much cheaper, and they can get more money in. And it's just really sad, because we're in a state, and I know you know this, and your teachers know this, we're in a state with this earth, we're in trouble. A lot of our soil has been contaminated, our air has been contaminated, our water's been contaminated. So we need to start taking care of things, because if we don't, we as a people won't be here much longer.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, Ronnie. In the studio, I have this piece of bark, and it came off a tree. And I live in a farm, and our nearest neighbors are roughly a mile away. And we had a rain after a drought. We had a rain, and the ground had several depressions in it, which became little wet water creeks or streams. And Mrs. Finelli and I were out before the broadcast started in the morning, and she said, "Look at this! Look at this foam on the top of the water running downhill, forming a stream." So she scooped this up with a piece of bark, and it was literally like if you lifted the lid of a top-load washing machine and you saw way too much soap in there or detergent in there, and it was foaming. But this foam wasn't like if you touched the bubbles. They were more elastic. They had more surface adhesion. They did not want to break. It was like a vinyl rubber kind of bubbles. And so when you talk about pollution, there's no question that it's happening. Now, the reason I mentioned where we live, what I was trying to explain is we have some woods, we have some grasslands. We don't do anything. We don't put any chemicals on our land for the cows. We're a grass-fed operation for our cattle. This stuff came from the sky. We know it came from the sky. So I hopped in a four-wheeler, I went down the road, I hopped in a truck, I went further down the road, and it was everywhere. It wasn't just our farm, and it wasn't something running off our neighbor's farm, because we live in the mountains, the Ozark Mountains. It's kind of hilly here. So I know what comes from our neighbors. I know what doesn't. This came from the sky. So you're absolutely right. We are being attacked 360 degrees, electromagnetic attacks, sonic attacks, particulate attacks, chemical attacks, food additive attacks, food preservatives, everything you can possibly think of, we are being attacked with. And our life expectancy, of course, I'm sure you know this, is going down. I used to say, Americans had the best food, the best health, and our life expectancy was something that the whole world envied. No longer. We are losing that status. So are you saying that through supplementation, we can cleanse our colon, we can help remove some of these toxins that we've consumed without our permission? We've consumed them because either we don't know they're there, or we are being lied to through omission by companies who make products for our consumption, that we ingest these, and we need to get rid of them. Are you saying that this can happen with supplements in general?
Supplements in general can. It is my opinion, and it's just an opinion, that supplements are not the total answer. I wish I could say that. That'd be great, but I don't necessarily believe that. It's really our eating habits. It's our exercise. It's how we're being bombarded and intruded by, I call them intruders, different chemicals that is going in the air and the water. So our water is a real important issue. If you're drinking, bottled water and you think you're safe, you really need to be thinking again. Bottled water is some of the worst water out there. I don't care what the brand name is. So it's important that our water is clean and purified, and there's some great purifiers out there. RO water is not the name of the game either. So doing the research of different supplements, doing the research of different waters, doing the research of different diets, doing the research. A lot of times, my daughter's a personal trainer, and so people come to her and say, I really want to lose weight. And I watch that with my product because, one of the side effects is losing some weight. But they'll buy it thinking it is a weight loss program. And it is not. That is not what I'm saying. You need to be cleaning your body, cleaning your colon. It's like washing your car. You need to wash your car. Is that going to make your car go faster? No, but it's much better for the car. So I look at the people will say, weight loss is really important. So they'll go to my daughter and they'll say, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds. And so how many hours do I need to work out? And my daughter will say, well, what are you eating? And they'll look at her stunned. They'll be like, almost like, how dare you ask me this? And it's like, 80% of what you eat is how you lose weight or gain weight. 20% of it is exercise. And most people have it flipped around. So this is why, and then of course those people that maybe have a lot of weight to them, they go, well, the only way to lose weight is to do all of this exercise. And boy, that makes it tough. So there's really some myths that need to be broken.
You mentioned washing the car. Well, when I wash the car, I wash the underside too. The fenders, behind the bumpers, the metal bumpers on our trucks. I want to prevent the rust, and I think that's what you're talking about. If you don't maintain cleanliness, you might rust inside. We'll be right back. Ronnie McMullen's with us, and his corporation, GetTheTea.com. GetTheTea.com. Class, the contact number is there on the website if you'd like to call. And I'm just looking at some of the categories of supplements. Now, you just don't offer tea. You offer, I'll just mention these categories: cardiovascular health, cleanse teas, digestive health, eye health, fat burners, food protein, you call this from the sea, glucose maintenance, hair and skin, immune support, joint and back health, liquid supplements, and you've got monthly specials, your book, and stamina and energy. You have a lot of offerings, even within the categories that I've mentioned. Now, one of the things that you and I have talked about off the air, and I absolutely positively agree with you, is Allicin, Allicin. And that is, for me, that lowers my blood pressure. Can you tell us about Allicin, please?
Allicin is the healing part of the garlic. And, there's a lot of companies that have Allicin, but the Allicin is a real low concentrate. The garlic's real high, but the Allicin part. So my Allicin is more isolated for the Allicin. So there's actually 300 milligrams of Allicin in one pill. So it's a 2-month supply. You only need one a day, and it does wonders for cardiovascular. I wish I could tell you all this stuff, but again, held back by some rules. But I take one every day, and I'll just tell you, for me, I don't get the flu. I don't get a cold, and for me, my blood pressure is beautifully in the normal range, which, and I've got stuff going on. So to have stuff going on and have your cardiovascular and your vitals be pretty good, that's really exciting. And to me, what's it worth not having to call in sick? And you definitely can't call in sick on your own company. So it makes it really hard to, if you're sick, to go to work. I mean, because you're like, well, you either got the sniffles or you're achy or whatever. And, I kind of bypass all that just by taking Allicin. So it's we have 3 top sellers. The tea's number 1. Our Allicin is probably number 2. And then our colostrum, which is for the gut, is number 3. So Allicin is a beautiful product, especially if you're trying to do something with your cardiovascular system.
You mentioned colostrum. I have started taking colostrum, and I'm pretty excited about it. Can you tell us what some of, I guess we can't say what will happen, but what might happen? Can you say it that way or not?
Let's try the might happen. You might have a lot of relief in your stomach and your GI tract. There's a lot of growth hormones in the colostrum. For me, I'll use it for me, and again, every body is different. But for me, the colostrum was a godsend because let's just go this way, and this, Vincent, so I'm definitely not telling you anything here. But if a calf does not get mama's milk within 24 hours, that calf will die. And
absolutely
so
correct.
This is how important the nutrients are in colostrum, which is kind of a special formula full of vitamins and amino acids and many other things. That for the calf now, taking that is organic milk, what have you, feeding the calves organically. This is now processed to where we can enjoy some of the benefits of those minerals and those vitamins and those amino acids. by taking the colostrum, and what it does for our gut is absolute. Now, if you have lactose intolerance, then you're probably not going to be good for this. There's not very much lactose, but there is a little bit. So obviously it's a milk product. But if you don't have lactose intolerance and you have stomach problems, it might really help.
Ronnie McMullen, thank you so much for joining the faculty at USA Prepares. I really appreciate it. I enjoy broadcasting with you, and I enjoy our discussions both on air and off air. Class, you've heard people come back from work and they say, wow, what a rough day. Well, if you want to see a rough day, try being an entrepreneur. It's not 8 hours a day. It's 24 hours a day. And so Ronnie has applied his products to his life, and he's found that they work. So I suggest you give it a thought. 928-308-0408. Ronnie McMullen, thanks so much for being with us. Everyone all set, cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. This hour we're going to be talking about infrastructure. And Dr. Tim Shealy is joining us. Welcome, Dr. Tim Shealy.
Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning. And let me give out your website, gettingsmarteraboutthesmartgrid.org. Gettingsmarteraboutthesmartgrid.org. And there's some press releases there. There's some information you can read about the smart grid. We are being attacked by the smart grid, and it's a fight that I believe that we all must engage in to stop the spread of the smart grid. We're talking about the Internet of Things. We're talking about refrigerators that will be monitoring your behavior. We're talking about what you watch on these streaming Internet videos, your behavior, what you do, when you do it, when you wash your clothes, when you wash your dishes, what you buy in and put in your refrigerator, how often you open your refrigerator and freezer doors. I mean, even electric hot water heaters may know when you are taking a shower based on the change in temperature of the hot water heater. So we are being spied on from 360 degrees, at least 360 degrees, and add to that above and below. Our movements are being tracked, and our infrastructure is crumbling, and all this is happening at the same time. Dr. Shealy, you've written a press release about this. Can you share with us what your thoughts are?
Yeah, the press release that you're referring to was just sent out last week. Was really announcing a policy paper that I have just published that was presented on the 5th of February at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco. And the topic was, the title of the paper was reInventing Wires, the Future of Landlines and Networks. And really what it's about is the Internet, what's happening, where the Internet has come from and where it's headed, and where, and all these things that you were talking about a little earlier are part of that. But the bigger issue is who is going to own it and who's going to control it and who's going to have access to it. That's really at play right now, and this paper is about that. And the paper is titled Reinventing Wires, because what its basic thesis is that that everybody in the country should have pretty much equal access to the Internet and to the highest performance connection that can be economically provided overall. And just as we wired the entire country back in the 1930s for telephone service, and we wired the country also around that time for electric power, we need to rewire the country now for Internet access over optical fiber. And the people that need to do that primarily and to be in control of it are local cities and towns and municipalities. That's where it has to start, because it can't be something centrally controlled by either government or corporations. So that was really the purpose of the paper, and it's a pretty long paper, but it does have some summary sections in it that can be understood pretty easily, I think. But the purpose of writing such a 100-page paper on this topic was to provide the public and to policymakers with the resource and the references they need to make the arguments that they will need to get the proper legislation and support from everybody from local city councils to state legislatures.
Now, as you were saying this, I was thinking about optical fiber. Now, the fiber itself, once put in the ground, even if it were laid on top of the ground, the optical fiber is immune from electromagnetic pulses and solar flares. Now, the electronics are not immune, but the fiber is. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Mm-hmm. So it seems to me that if we're putting fiber in, if we're connecting via fiber, even if we're stringing fiber along poles, like power poles or what we call telephone poles, even if the fiber were in the air and we had an EMP strike, that EMP would not travel along the fiber per se and blow out the equipment on the ends. However, it is possible that the equipment could be blown out with an EMP, but less likely connected to fiber as compared to connected to wire. Is that right?
That's exactly right, because the vulnerability would be localized wherever the lightning struck, but rather than to propagate through the entire network like it will with, that can happen with electric transmission lines, with the high voltage transmission lines. You can have electromagnetic pulses caused by solar flares or whatever, that can just propagate through the entire system and bring down many sites rather than just local.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something I think that's very important. You talked about Internet ownership and control. And on page 44, as I'm viewing it as a PDF on my screen right now, you say the Internet of Things privacy problem is not only about how to deal with inadvertent access to data, but also, and more importantly, about deliberate and authorized access. That's very important. What you're saying is, I believe what you're saying is that people are intentionally looking into what we might consider private information, but the other team is looking at that as well. They have authority, and they are or they are just abusing their authority, or they're just deliberately accessing this data and information. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The Internet of Things is the concept that everything around us, every gadget or device or whatever, whether from your refrigerator to your cell phone to your computer or to your Fitbit that you wear on your wrist, can be interconnected to this gigantic network. And unfortunately, that could be done, but the unfortunate thing is that the business model for the Internet has morphed into a commercial model that is about the collection and sale of that information and advertising, mainly for advertising purposes, but now, as we can see, for political purposes too. The collection of that information has become the main commodity, and certainly you're given free access to the Internet or all kinds of apps or devices that you can use are very inexpensive, but the real purpose of doing that is the commercial value of the data that can be collected from it, because the motivation behind the industry is it's the sale of course, more chips and software, but even more importantly, the sale of the data that they can collect about you and glean from this system that becomes a commodity in itself. So you have to look at where that goes. Now, for advertising is a little more benign than what we've seen in terms of politics right now. And I think what you saw just in the last week was that the heads of the CIA and the NSA and other intelligence agencies have said that they are starting to see a ramp up in this kind of activity on the Internet with the collection of data and the planting of false information emerging again as a precursor to the 2018 election that will be coming up. And presumably some of that, at least, is Russian in origin, but we don't really know, and that we don't know enough about it. But that's what's emerging. So we have to keep in mind that security and privacy on the Internet is becoming a critical issue, absolutely critical issue, and it will possibly limit the growth and usefulness of the whole thing if we can't deal with it.
You know, something that you said triggered a thought and an extreme concern, and maybe we need to shock those in class today into action. Let me ask a question relating to something that you said, and maybe your answer will shock those in class. You mentioned Fitbit, Fitbit. That's like kind of a wristband that kind of like a watch, stylish, modern, stylish kind of watch. I wouldn't want one, don't have one, am not interested. However, I see medical professionals at all levels wearing these at an increasing rate. And it monitors their bodily functions, heart rate, and so forth. Even monitors how many steps they take, how far they walk. And it's connected to the Wi-Fi and the Internet. These medical professionals wear them because they're purchasing themselves, but they get benefits that they perceive as being above the cost of the Fitbit device that they're wearing on their wrist. Now, this Fitbit indicates or transmits bodily functions and activities, and they go someplace. And no one's really sure, I'll bet, exactly where their data is going, and they're probably not even concerned, and they're probably saying, you know what, I've got nothing to hide, so, it's okay. Those who are paying attention. Those who are really paying attention are probably saying, I would never want one of those things. Here's my question to you, Dr. Shealy. Do these devices like the Fitbit, can they determine when a person's having sex?
I'd say yes, probably so, or at least with a high probability. They can establish the probability of any physical activity or in a daily routine. From a statistical standpoint.
That was the question that I hope has shocked all of you. So, if you want that knowledge known, get a Fitbit. If you don't. That's shocking. We'll be right back. Class Dr. Tim Schoechle with us, PhD, and he's written a fabulous article, and we're discussing this article. And one of the things that you talk about in section 2.4.2, regulation, the FCC, the captured regulator. You want to say Crawford has described how the communication media audience became captured. Similarly, Harvard ethics scholar Norm Alster describes the FCC as captured in his report, Captured Agency, How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries It Presumably Regulates. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it's interesting to look at who's the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission today, Ajit Pai, whose career is basically as an attorney, chief counsel, I believe, for Verizon. One of the main themes of this paper of mine, Reinventing Wires, is that our access to the Internet. Well, let me just read briefly to answer your question. Let me just briefly read from the first page of the paper. The Internet has become one of the defining technologies of the modern world. Why has America, its creator, become one of its most impoverished users among all developed nations in terms of the proportion of its people with Internet access and the speed and quality of that access? Basically, the answer to that question, why has it happened, is that the our access to the Internet is dominated by three huge corporations, which I call a triopoly, which is Verizon, Comcast, and AT&T. And those three companies really dominate the lion's share of the access to the Internet, whether it's wired or wireless, in any form today. There's a certain logic behind the wireless that we should talk about in a minute, but basically the bottom line is that the industry, when you make the head of the Federal Communications Commission an attorney for one of those three companies, and there's the same thing in the paper outlines the whole history of the leadership behind the FCC. You just see a long history of this, what's called regulatory capture, or in some other terms, it's called in academic circles public choice theory. This is the idea that public officials tend to serve their own needs first before the needs of the public, and that agencies that are regulating industries tend to be captured by those industries. And a good example of that is what we call the revolving door, where people will spend time working for a government agency, then work for the industry, then back into the government agency, and back out to industry again. And this is a pattern that is in many regulatory agencies the case, and in the FCC in particular. And so we can't expect the FCC, without a lot of public pressure, to do the right thing. Now, they did do the right thing a couple of years ago in the adoption of the net neutrality principle. And that was the principle that Internet service providers could not favor a particular, you couldn't pay to play. In other words, everybody had an equal crack at getting on the Internet. There were no fast lanes or slow lanes. That was the principle. And it was a hard-fought battle to get that principle established in policy. And that was accomplished finally because there were millions of public comments that were submitted over a long period of time. And the pressure was great enough to get the agency to do that, even though the leadership had a conflict of interest between their careers in the industry and their role in the FCC. But with the Trump administration, all that changed immediately, and the new the Verizon attorney was appointed to head up the agency, and we're right back where we were. He threw the net neutrality rule out. The present administration voted it out, and now we're back sort of where we were, except that it's, of course, being challenged in court, so it hasn't played out yet. But and I doubt that it will ever succeed, but that's what's happened.
When we come back, Dr. Shealy, can we talk more about wireless? And one of the things I'd like to mention is something that one of our other senior instructors has mentioned, and that's solving a problem that doesn't exist, wireless charging of electric devices. And it seems like this might fly through the FCC. We'll be right back. Dr. Tim Shealy's with us, getting smarter about the smartgrid.org. Dr. Shealy, we have a senior engineer, electrical engineer. His name is Bert Bertonis in California. And we have talked on air at times about solving a problem that doesn't exist, and that is charging devices wirelessly. So we're talking about charging the smartphones and other devices without wires. That's really not a problem that exists, but it seems that this may get through the Federal Communications Commission. And what we're talking about is massive amounts of power being transmitted through the air just to charge a cell phone, for example. And about 95%, at least 95%, is lost in transmission. It seems like the FCC has lost its way. It should not be in the business of allowing charging through the air. The FCC is in the business of communications. This is not communications. This is raw power going through the air to charge devices. Are you in agreement with this, or does this not set with you?
Yeah, basically I'm in agreement that in agreement with that. I've been concerned about it for a long time. I guess one could argue that, well, the communication equipment needs to be charged, but I think that's a weak argument. The bottom line is, or the basic problem is that the Federal Communications Commission is not equipped to deal with the issue of any health or biological effects of electromagnetic fields. They don't have the expertise and the ability to deal with that, and there's increasing evidence now with the World Health Organization, and now with what's called an NTP study, the National Toxicology Program, that there is a potentially there's evidence that that electromagnetic radiation can cause cancer from the type of radiation from cell phones that can be the source of cancer. There's a relationship that has not been clearly understood, but it is now becoming more understood. The mechanisms for this, researchers are just beginning to get a handle on it, and there's clear evidence now that the manipulating electromagnetic fields and radiation, such as radiation in its various forms, can influence cell growth rates and cancer growth. My paper goes into the state of the research on this, but it's changing every day, and the FCC is clearly out of their domain to deal with that. And I don't know exactly who it is. Certainly the FDA or other agencies need to be concerned, but to be able to permit this kind of mass deployment of equipment that's deliberately radiating, with radiating this kind of energy is irresponsible without having some scientific basis behind that. It's just mind-boggling that this would be allowed.
Dr. Shealy, I've given seminars in many locations in the country in person, and I talked about big lies. And one of the things I talk about is during this seminar is that it's been shown that these frequencies, these microwave frequencies, can literally cook you and cause cancer and so forth. And at the end of the seminar, which might go for an hour and a half or an hour or longer, I asked the question, okay, so if you believe half of what I've said, no, if you believe a quarter of what I've said, no, if you believe 10% of what I've said, how many of you are willing to give up your cell phones? And the answer is always the same. No one. No one is willing to give up his or her cell phone, even though they know in their hearts that brain cancer is up, breast cancer is up, testicular cancer is up from keeping cell phones in the front pocket of the pants. They know this. They know that they become dizzy when using the cell phone. They know that they don't feel right in their head, literally. They can feel a sensation. They know all this, and yet they will not put down their cell phones. They sleep with their cell phones. They've got their cell phones under their pillow and next to their pillow with them 24 hours a day, in the restroom, everywhere they go. And when they sit down to eat, it's on the table next to them so they can see it. They are addicted, but they will not stop using their cell phones. That's what I've determined. Does that square with what you have found as well?
Yeah, that's my paper, Reinventing Wires, does have a number of references and discussion of that topic, particularly not just the possible physiological addiction, but also the mental or psychological habit-forming nature of that and dependencies that develop around the use of smartphones. Now, I'm not advocating banning smartphones. I don't have a smartphone. I do have a cell phone, which I use occasionally, but I don't. I don't depend on it, and I don't think that the basic theme of my paper, Reinventing Wires, is that we need to start with and give everyone the basic infrastructure of the wired network of optical fiber, which is superior in many respects, not just this health or biological effects reasoning, but a lot of other reasons. But start with that, and then if people want to then it's their option to use wireless networks. But I think what this industry is trying to do is make the wireless mechanism the only one that you can, the main one for accessing the internet. And that's what what's called 5G, our fifth generation wireless strategy, is all about, to basically force 5G on us all as the primary means of accessing the internet. And the reasoning behind that is that it's very profitable. Wireless is far more profitable. The wires and the optical fiber access is simple and cheap. The wireless networks are proprietary and expensive. And they have built this industry around and made America number 17 among 20 developed nations in internet access of its people by imposing this dominating triopoly. Has imposed a internet access that is slow, that is artificially scarce and expensive, and they like to keep it that way. And when you buy a smartphone, you're locking yourself into planned obsolescence, because they want to upgrade these things on a periodic basis. If you have optical fiber, is future-proof, and it doesn't change. It's resilient, and you're not locked into this kind of escalating evolution of new products every couple of years.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and there's proof to this. You're talking about planned obsolescence, and I've talked to people who have cell phones, and they say, "Oh, I got to get a new one." Why do they have to get a new one? Well, it's getting slower. Really, it's getting slower. Well, and what Apple did was they would say, well, we've got a new operating system, just download it. And they don't really say exactly what it does. But you can download the new operating system. So new, to many people, they may think that that's better. I'm running an unsupported version of the Windows operating system on some of our computers for this broadcast right now. I'm also running Linux. But what I'm saying is I don't want newer, because newer seems to be getting slower and slower and slower. And the more I would upgrade, the more I would find I would get more advertisements. Well, what Apple did, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Shealy, what Apple did with their iPhone is they deliberately slowed it down based on the power capacity, we'll say, of the internal battery of the iPhone. So as the battery got older, the Apple phone would slow down. And people would say, well, it's getting too slow, I can't stand it. And they would, instead of buying a battery that Apple would charge about $80 for 80, which is a sin in my book as well. $80 for a battery for a phone is nuts. But that's what they did. So people would say, I'm not going to spend the $80 for a battery. I'll just get a new phone. And they'd buy a new phone with a new battery because they didn't want to replace the battery, because Apple ripped them off at a cost of $80 to replace the battery. Why? Because they didn't know how to open the back of the case. Why? Because Apple doesn't want you to. Apple wants you to be dependent on them. They want you to be forever their customers, and they want to sell you more and more and more. Is that far-fetched, or do you think that there's truth in what I just said?
Oh, well, it's well documented. I mean, this is how Apple got to be the biggest corporation in the world. It's well documented. In fact, the Wall Street Journal, I think broke this story, and Apple was very embarrassed, and now they're offering rebates and things like that to people that try to backpedal on this. But it's well known that and well documented that that's what happened, and but that's built into the system. These private corporations are about profits, and that's what they're going to do. And that's why I say optical fiber systems need to be built out by cities, towns, and communities, not by big corporations like Verizon, Comcast, and AT&T. and then dominated by suppliers like Samsung and Apple.
If you want to have some fun, class, and exercise in futility and exercise in frustration, when I say fun, I was only kidding, just try calling Verizon's prepaid telephone support. Just try getting someone on the phone. Just try to get your problem solved. And what you'll find is it's darn near impossible. And for those who say, you know what, I don't want a smartphone, I just want one of those, we'll call them a dumb phone, a flip phone, and you say, well, I'll just get one of those $15 Verizon prepaid 300-minute cards at Walmart, and you'll find that the coverage is not the same. Even though it says Verizon, you won't get as many cell towers, and it may not work in your house or where you live. No kidding. We'll be right back. Dr. Tim Schoechle is with us, class. You might find this interesting. This broadcast is carried over CenturyLink's communications network. I absolutely despise CenturyLink. If I go outside my my house, walk down the driveway, turn left, I can find telephone cable strung across trees. I'm not kidding you. Strung across trees. It's still there. I can take a picture of it, and that is what CenturyTel has done to repair telephone lines previously that didn't work. They literally strung it from tree to tree to tree. Now, the infrastructure in our neck of the woods is buried, but they had a problem with the cable, and the way they fixed it was they literally, for years, just left this wire strung in the trees, and they abandoned it, and it's still in the trees. Now, they did fix it. It took years, but they did fix it. It's still there, and I can take a picture. I probably should and show you what this looks like. But there's an article in USA Today. It's called Bad Reputation, America's top 20 most hated companies. Number 20 is Weinstein and Company for sexual abuse. Number 20 is Weinstein Company for sexual abuse. Number 19, United Airlines. Number 18, Facebook for fake ads, fake news. Number 17, CenturyLink. Nearly 43% of the respondents had negative things to say about CenturyLink. Can you imagine that? That's what's happening. And the reason I'm mentioning this, Dr. Schoechle, is because you talk about on your reInventing Wires document that AT&T and Verizon have pushed to decommission their landlines, claiming they are uneconomical and unnecessary because they've been replaced by wireless services. What I just said is we just proved it, right, with that article and what they did in our wiring. For those people who live on the same road I do, stringing wires through the trees. That's like third world country application of just put a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah. I think what's happened is when you have to. My paper goes in to a lot of history to make it easy to understand why this all happened. The money is now in the wireless arena, and the wired infrastructure was regulated. The prices were regulated, and the service level was regulated. So the phone, after the Bell system was broken up into the Bell operating companies, the 7 Bell regional Bell companies, and then the AT&T, which was the international or national carrier. The regional companies then, over a number of years, basically spun off their wireless operations and their cable operations into private companies, which were essentially built on the basis of the public, the money that had been paid by the public over the many years to build the network. They spun it off as a profitable, unregulated subsidiaries and then independent ventures. And the executives went with them and got rich, basically. And building these unregulated wireless ventures and cable ventures that left the wires to languish, and now what they want to do is get the people that are still using the wires, the copper wires, to force them off of those and force them onto their wireless network by degrading the service, and that's where we're headed.
And that's absolutely true. And when I call CenturyTel, their technical people tell me, heck, you've got 3 meg service. You shouldn't have that. How did you get that? We shouldn't be giving you that. There's no reason for you to have that high of a speed. 3 meg? Really? They want to push me back to 1.5. That's what they want to do.
And so for everybody. That's my new idea.
There you go. Dr. Shealy, may I post a link to your document on USA Prepares so our class can read it?
Yes, you have the link, and actually the best link is the electromagnetichealth.org.
That's the one I'll use. Dr. Shealy, thanks so much for being with us in class today.